Awesemo baseball fans. Terry McBride back here with you live to talk through some MLB action live before lock here. I'm with your pal Gundacker, who will get pulled up on the screen momentarily, and we're brought to you by PrizePicks today. I have had a weird day. I kind of blacked out for a little while, woke up in the middle of hosting a NASCAR show earlier. It's been a crazy day, but had some time to dig into this slate, and I'm looking forward to talking it through with you, Gun. Before we do that, we got to tell everybody about Betting You, though. Betting You is our new podcast. It's a sports betting focused podcast that covers everything you could possibly want for college football. It's hosted by Ben Rasa and Matt Kajeski, two of our best minds as far as all kinds of football go, as far as all kinds of betting go, but specifically in the college football arena. These guys are killing it every single week. They cover everything you could want, taking you through every conference, all the best bets on the board. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Wednesday, so make sure you subscribe to that so you're getting all the different episodes that come down. Hit the like, hit the subscribe to get us going. Hit some of those premium tools and content that we've got up on the site for free today. That would be NFL Week 3 top stacks is free on the site. Gun, that's absurd. The MLB top pitchers for tonight's slate is also free on the site, but it's ridiculous for us to have the top stacks. That's the keys to the kingdom for the NFL. That's telling you all the quarterback plays, the correlated receivers, who's over-owned, who's under-owned. It's everything you need. What's going on, man? How you doing? What are you thinking today?
Yeah, no, those tools are insane, especially with stacking being so proficient for big field tournaments. So definitely go check that out. Take advantage of that. I'm doing great. Watching a little Yankee baseball on a Saturday afternoon, getting ready to do some NFL prep, and baseball doing us a solid, man. We are just one Braves lineup short of being complete and almost ready to hit that crunch button.
Yeah, it's a luxury getting the lineups in that early. I'm taking a light day today. I just threw one lineup into the cheap main tournament and a couple single entries on FanDuel, just since I knew I'd be talking through with some of this stuff with you. But it's great to have the lineups in advance. Gives us an opportunity to talk through all these teams. I think this is a fascinating slate, just given the way that ownership's distributed through some of these stacks, and then the 4 apex pitchers that we've got to choose from at the top of the mound, and then what we can do with some of the value range. It's just really, really interesting the way this one breaks down for me. What are you seeing from like an overall perspective? Does anything really jump out at you before we get into specific pitchers?
Yeah, so the high ownership at the top end on pitchers definitely stands out, and then it creates a little bit more of an opportunity to be creative in the mid to low tiers. We talked Burns, Ray, Lance Lynn, all those guys 30+% owned. And then it falls into an area where the field's trying to compensate for the high end pitchers with some mid tier guys, and guys like Jordan Lyles, who definitely has blow up potential, pushes 17% owned. So it looks like there are some ways, I think, to attach yourself to what you might perceive as good chalk, if that exists in baseball, and then still get a little bit different by not maybe getting to the bad chalk. So that's kind of one of the things that I've been looking at. And then the stacks seem to be pretty evened out. And if you wanted to, avoid the cores and chase field, there's still plenty of upside bats on the slate with the White Sox, the Blue Jays, Great American Ballpark. So it's definitely a fun slate to come at with game theory. No matter what your style of play, you could probably get away with it on this slate and just, hope for the best.
Yeah, for sure. And just looking like at the top stacks board, like you said, there's just a lot of opportunity hiding in there. Even at the very top, we're getting some positively leveraged opportunities around the best offenses in baseball, some of them in very, very good situations. And it looks like the field on both sites is just kind of flocking around some of the value stacks, which I get. Yeah, everybody wants to pay up for some of these apex pitchers, but I do think there are some opportunities on the board in pitching where we don't necessarily need to go that route, where we're just looking at value plays. So I think it opens up a ton on the slate. I'm excited to get into it with you. When we talk about the top pitchers, I think it's kind of important to look at those 4 guys in terms of, does any one of them have a more likely, is one of them more likely than the other 3, or maybe 2 of them more likely than the other 3? To be a little bit limited in terms of what we expect from them, just in an innings pitch kind of a sense, from either there are some guys with injury concerns coming back from injury, rounding back into form. There are also some guys in that group of 4, and we're talking about Corbin Burns, Lance Lynn, Clayton Kershaw, and Robbie Ray, for anybody who doesn't, who that wasn't immediately obvious for. Is there anybody in that group of 4 who might be their team's locked up a playoff position. So they might just be looking to, hey, get them their routine start, their routine workload, but let's get them out of there after 5. Is that a concern for you when we've got these guys so tightly ranked, so highly owned, and so well projected?
Yeah, that's been my number one pushback on Lance Lynn here is the White Sox have the least to play for, it feels like. And then, a little bit of an eye-opening scare yesterday for Tony La Russa. Dylan Cease got hurt by, wasn't necessarily going deep, but this is like, I could lose pitchers here in meaningless baseball. So I am pushing back on Lynn a little bit. And then Kershaw, he's already against the wall with the roof open and Chase is hot, and they're kind of building him back up. So those two I think have some limit concerns. I can push back any Corbin Burns concerns with the idea that maybe they'll let him go out there and compete for that Cy Young award with Max Scherzer having a down game in Coors the other day, and then Robbie Ray is pitching for his team's playoff life. So I think narrative puts me more on Burns and Ray if I let that be a tiebreaker, and then Lynn and Kershaw have a little bit more potential bubble wrap around them.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. Lynn is definitely, to me, the most concerning. I did think it was interesting that they let Cease start the 6th, but then, like you said, comebacker got him, and he immediately got yanked because of an injury. That was the worst case scenario for them. It looks like he's going to be okay for the playoffs, not a big concern. But yeah, now that's going to be in the front of Tony La Russa's brain. Tony's an old school manager anyway. They were already starting to manage the innings with Lynn, and just over the course of the season, I was looking at his innings pitched. He's behind the pace that he's been in normal seasons in the past. He's thrown 146 innings in 26 starts this year, which is well behind 84 innings in 13 starts last year, and then way, way behind 208 and a third innings in 2019. So that's a major concern for me. And then I agree with you. I think they let Burns run in terms of chasing the Cy Young. I wish they wouldn't. I hate when teams do that. I think the same thing for perfect games and for no hitters and everything. It's kind of nonsense in a team sport to let a pitcher risk himself that way. And we see it time and again where these guys get overextended. The other thing about Burns, he's already thrown triple his career high in innings pitched this season. So I'm a little concerned about the management there. And then Kershaw is kind of working his way back. So he went, had not pitched. He's made 2 starts since coming back in September. He threw 50 pitches in 4 1/3, and then he threw 74 pitches over 5, striking out 8 reds along the way. I think he's going to be in like that 90 pitch range, which for me is maybe enough for Kershaw, but I'm still concerned there. I think that like what you said, Ray pitching for their playoff life from behind, I think is the guy that is most likely to deliver us a big start here. Are you ranking them in that order basically? Or you're saying Ray, Burns, and then how does it come out for Lynn and Kershaw for you between the two of those guys?
So I had Kershaw above Lynn just because Kershaw looked super solid in his last outing, but I'll be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit worried about the elements there. Sure. That game, I mentioned this morning, a lot of the East Coast players may not realize it because it's kind of 7 p.m. where we're at. That's going to be more of an afternoon type game in Arizona. It's still 90 degrees plus, so it's a hot ball game with a positive hitting environment. And a guy like Ketel Marte leading off, maybe Kershaw isn't as sharp, but I do think getting him built up is still something that's on the mind. But if he only went 85 pitches at 9,800, you feel like maybe there's a glass ceiling. So I have that in the back of my mind, but I do have Kershaw over Lynn for now. But I wouldn't argue either way. Like if you wanted Lynn over Kershaw, vice versa, like it's more of a coin flip to me than not.
Yeah, and look, we're splitting hairs because we kind of have to. We can only roster a pair out of the quad aces that we've got to work with here. So I think it makes sense to kind of talk these things through. When you look at Corbin Burns, when you look at Robbie Ray, out of those two guys, based on let's take the depth off the table and just talk about the matchup. Which one of those two guys do you prefer based on matchup and price and ownership, of course, within that?
So on paper, the Twins have a higher strikeout propensity, but I also feel like they have a better offense when it comes to hit for power, hit for results, and they've been getting hot at the right time. But matchup wise, I think the strikeouts, that's what we're chasing in DFS. They lie more in the Twins, whereas the D-backs, they don't hit for much power, but the K rates are still cumulatively lower than you might expect. With just I got Varsho, Rojas, and then the pitcher spot at over 25%. 100%. Everyone else kind of scrappy. So maybe if we're pure chasing ceiling, I think Robbie Ray gets the edge in matchup.
Yeah, and then Arizona, the active roster, 21.6% strikeout rate against left-handed pitching, very, very good. What about throwing the Mets into that mix in the on the other side of Burns there, and get back to him? What are they presenting as in terms of opposition to a dominant Corbin Burns start? Assuming all systems go, they're going to let him pitch to whenever he wants to chase that Cy Young. Do the Mets offer much threat, much resistance here?
I mean, there are some ISO rates getting to uncomfortable levels, but and that my data kind of pulls from the beginning of last season. Lindor, Conforto, Alonso, Javi Baez, all with 200 plus ISO since the beginning of last year. But only Jeff McNeil and Lindor have a sub 20% overall K rate against righties since the beginning of last year. Everyone else is 1-4, 1-5, and Corbin Burns, he's in a different stratosphere when it comes to getting strikeouts. So he doesn't need much help, but there's a good foundation for strikeouts in this Mets lineup and the Mets are all but, done with for the season at this rate.
Yeah. We're seeing, basically the full version of the Mets lineup, but they've got nothing to play for at this point, like you said, and plenty of strikeouts there. 35.5% strikeout rate over 158 innings this season for Corbin Burns. Just been absolutely dominant and every bit a Cy Young contender, at least, if not the Cy Young favorite at this point. And really, looking at the strikeout rates of some of these other options, you've got Lynn at 27.8%. Ray is the one who really rivals him in terms of the strikeout acumen this season. He's been fantastic in cutting his walks in half, 32.8% strikeout rate overall, 3.15 xFIP. And it looks like Ray is getting, at least on the FanDuel slate. Let me jump back to the top pitchers tool as I'm talking this through. Top pitchers, guys, you got to get into that tool if you're not taking a look at it. It just breaks down the entire pitching slate, which is really what drives everything. It informs the entire day around MLB DFS. But just taking a look, it looks like Ray comes in as the guy who's most efficiently owned out of those top four guys. He's got the second highest probability of being a top two starter. He's coming in at 33% overall ownership. So that's a little bit below what his probability of being the top starter is. So we gain a little bit of ground on the field there where all three of the other guys are negatively leveraged. Corbin Burns rocketing up to 50% ownership. Does that make it viable to just say, hey, forget about Burns. Let me make Robbie Ray one of my top starter here. And then I'm going to look down the board a little bit for my SP2. Or are you really looking to combine one of Burns or Ray with one of Lynn and Kershaw?
Man, it wasn't that hard for me to get 5 Giants with Burns and Rays, but it wasn't like the front of the store Giants. For some reason, Alex Dixon came in at 2K bare bones min price. That seems like a problem. And then Wilmer Flores made the lineup and he's kind of cheap. So I didn't feel like I was pinching too many pennies to still get access to the Giants and cores. In a 1v1 between Burns and Rays, I got to go with the tiebreaker going to Burns, basically because he doesn't allow the long ball like Robbie Ray. As much as the Twins strike out, they're still scattered in the top of my home run model, and that kind of spooks me. And it feels like the Twins have been playing spoiler, especially against the Blue Jays. So I have more Burns than Ray here, but I also have plenty of overlap between them. And I didn't feel like I was overcompensating by punting bad players. I was still getting access to top end stacks, just not the main guys. And maybe that helps me be a little bit different because I don't think I'm gonna get different with Alex Dickerson, but I don't have to get to like Jordan Lyles just to say I got access to cores or Chase Field.
Yeah, they did us some favors with some hitter pricing around the league in certain interesting spots. I think the Twins on the other side of that Robbie Ray game, based on the power upside that you said, I think they're somewhat interestingly priced in that regard as well. They're a little bit more contrarian of an option because of the opposing pitcher. But there's just a lot of different spots that you can get to, at least quality bats that have you can find a path to success, right? I can find a path to success for the Twins based on all their power, based on the fact that when hitters do make contact against Robbie Ray, he's still giving up a 42.8% hard hit percentage on the season, an 8.9% barrel rate, 90.3 miles an hour of average exit velo, and a 16.7 degree average launch angle. That is pretty reasonable home run trajectory to throw at hitters like Josh Donaldson, Miguel Sano, premium home run hitters in that lineup. So yeah, it's not something where I've gotten over my concerns about Robbie Ray. I don't think he's going to walk the world here and give up and be the old bad version of Robbie Ray. So I'm not concerned about him, but it's definitely leading into maybe wanting to get a little bit of the Twins and then maybe spreading some of these other shares around. So if we're talking about maybe spreading out some ownership from the apex pitchers, particularly maybe getting a little bit under the field on the extreme ownership on Burns, maybe getting a little bit away from the over ownership on Lance Lynn, who were a little concerned about the effectiveness, the potential depth. Who are some of the guys from the next tier down that you're looking at that you find a little bit appealing? And then give me the list, and then we'll jump into why after I do a quick read.
Yeah, so the two guys that I ended up reaching for the most, Oscar Inoa and Tyler Anderson. Starting with Anderson, it's more so the matchup than the pitcher itself. This Angels lineup has a very high cumulative strikeout rate. I mean, they're leading off with a lefty that strikes out 40% of the time against a left-handed pitcher. There are a couple guys like Phil Gosselin, maybe David Fletcher, that don't strike out as much, but there's still some more implied strikeouts for 7,500 Tyler Anderson to maybe get through 5-6 innings, still a strikeout per. So I landed on him quite a bit. And then Oscar Inoa, it's kind of twofold here. The Braves, I maybe undersold how much they're fighting for. They're kind of trying to hold off the Phillies here. Yesterday, Fried did go 9 innings, complete game after they finished that suspended game. So the bullpen is as rested as it can be. But the Padres have certainly not been as high octane as a lot of people like to perceive them as. I think they are just a little bit below average in WRC plus against righties. So Inoa, I'd be looking for him to also maybe 5-6 innings, get a strikeout per, hopefully qualify for a quality start. If not, just don't get blown up. And against, Velasquez and dipping into that bullpen, I think the Braves offense is playing more inspired than most on this team. So those are two for me. Jordan Lyles is the one that I stuck out by the field. And that's the one that I've been kind of pushing it back against. We've got him at 17% ownership versus a 7.9% chance of being a top pitcher. And I just feel like I just can't get behind that, man. Lyles has definitely had some stunners in his game log, a couple 30s here and there. But I think I'm more inclined to lean on the Orioles stacked versus playing Lyles, and maybe that's where I get wrong here. And then lastly, Anthony DeSclafani, his top 2 pitcher percentage went down a little bit versus what it was this morning, but it's still a little bit of leverage. We got him as a top 2 pitcher 5.3% of the time with only 1% ownership. So there's like 3 levels of leverage. One, the Rockies being the highest owned stack on the slate. If you pitch against that, you might go against that way. 2, if you play him in lieu of a Jordan Lyles, you eat against that ownership, and then that's basically. I don't really want to get too excited about pitching in cores, but there is some viability there from a game theory standpoint.
Yeah, and look, in a total vacuum, he is a talented guy. We know that he is at least a capable starter. It's just the cores factor. Otherwise, he'd be higher priced and probably definitely more popular than Jordan Lyles going into Camden Yards like that. To me, even with the Coors Field factor, honestly, there's such a difference between those two pitchers that I think I would still probably lean into the other side of that one with DeSclafani. So I threatened to make a read and cut you off before you got into the why, but you snuck the why in on us anyway. But that's fine, because that's the kind of thing that we care about more here at Awesemo anyway, is the why, the how, teaching people, getting them all the right answers, teaching people how to fish. Instead of giving you fish, we teach you how to fish so that you can do these things on your own. You understand the reasoning behind why we're making these choices. And when you have $29.95 in your pocket, you can sign up for an Awesemo.com weekly pass. That gets you on Awesemo Plus, gets you access to all the tools and content for every sport that we cover for DFS out there at the platinum level. It includes player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack, where guys like me and Gunn are hanging out all day, answering questions, talking shop, just talking to our members. It's a great resource for everybody. We've got our DFS 101 channel in there. You get access to Lineup Builder with that plan. So much more behind the scenes too. If you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum and you can take advantage of a promo code we have for this show, that's MLB Live Before Lock, all caps, all one word, MLB Live Before Lock, all one word, all caps. 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You can find the link to activate the coupon in the description below the video. If you're looking to play only MLB DFS, you can sign up for one of our Awesemo Plus MLB packages for as low as $4.95 weekly for the Express. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. We will talk about PrizePicks in about 9 minutes, but I think we got a little bit of time here to talk about some more of these values on the board. I think Gundacker is definitely the most compelling value on the board, particularly just based on some of the ownership marks that we're getting. It's just inefficient ownership for his talent. You mentioned him in that rundown. He's at 8,800 on the DK slate. He's at 7,600 on the FanDuel slate, and he's pulling absurdly low ownership for who he is. The kid's thrown 81 and a third this season, 26.8% strikeout rate, a 3.38 xFIP, inducing 12.6% swinging strikes, 30.2% CSW. He's been okay, he's got a little bit of a contact profile issue, but so does Robbie Ray for way, way more, going up against, a similar offense, an offense that, maybe Robbie Ray's opponent is hitting more home runs. So looking at the opposing Padres, you mentioned the WRC plus is right around the league average. They're probably an overrated offense. That's my favorite spot on the board. I think is going to be pitching, like you said, pretty deep into this game. The Braves need to win this game. I think he makes tons and tons of sense, and I think he buys you a ton with that value. Is he your favorite overall value play on the board, and how far beyond the field are you looking to go?
Yeah, he's my highest owned mid-tier guy. Like, I understand why people aren't Jordan Lyles, and it's because this incarnation of the Orioles lineup just has a ridiculously high strikeout rate. It's not the normal Orioles lineup with Cedric Mullins, guys like that. But I still want to play talented pitchers, and I think is talented. So that's why I'm leaning more towards him versus Lyles here. So yeah, he's my highest mid-tier. But like I said, I didn't feel like I had to get too cheap at pitcher too often to get the bats I wanted. And I think the reason being is because Ryan McKenna is leading off for the Orioles at 2K. Alex Dickerson is 2K. There's still some very, very, very cheap nuggets scattered throughout the slate that kind of allow you to glue the big pitchers and some big stacks together. So Inoa is about as cute as I got. I do have some Tyler Anderson against that Angels lineup as well. And I'm on the fence about being actionable about Desclafani. I feel like I don't know. I don't agree with the Rockies ownership, but I also just tend to not get to Coors pitching if I can help it. But I see a little bit of leverage opportunity there because of all the aforementioned reasons.
Yeah. And I think that all makes sense. Looking down the board here, I mean, it becomes a mess pretty quickly. I have very little interest in Chris Ellis, even against that lousy Rangers lineup. A lot of the field is going to be on that Rangers lineup, but he's not the kind of pitcher. That's not the kind of ballpark I want to be attacking a leverage situation with. So he's out. Eli Morgan, Vince Velasquez, John Gray at Coors, Jaime Barria, none of these guys inspire any kind of confidence. Do you get anything out of the middle of the board where we've got two positively leveraged pitchers and neither one is a comfortable name to be saying, neither one is all that great a matchup? But Rich Hill at 6,900 on the DK slate, or Eric Fede at 8,000. Those are the DK prices. Or Eric Fede at 8,000 going up against Cincinnati. Rich Hill taking on Milwaukee in that spot. I don't love it, but if you're looking for that mid-range value, you want to get away from some of the field, the more obvious choices. And to me, makes more sense. Figure out a way to pay for the difference there because he's coming in lower owned. But if you can't figure out a good way to pay for the difference, say you're going to some of the more expensive bats, is either Fede or Hill viable at all?
I mean, viable if you have tapered expectations of value, or if that's a little bit more subjective to you. Like if Fede, if you were happy with 12 to 16 from Fede as a SP2, same concept for Rich Hill, I'd get it. We talked about how some of these teams are coasting. Maybe the Brewers become a team that before long start subbing in some guys sixth inning or so. But it's even in a good matchup, Rich Hill kind of gives you some concerns just based on his blister proneness, right? And then Fede, I'm still on the red stack. But without Joey Votto in the lineup, I guess the conglomerate strikeout rate goes up a little bit. It does get a lot of righties here to tap into his 25% K rate on the season, sub 4 xFIP. So I guess I could carve out a little bit of a justification at 8K, just trying to get 2x my return here. Definitely wouldn't love it, but I could understand it just based on a couple of metrics that are going his way. And then what do you think about Zach Gallen? I feel obviously it's one of the toughest matchups you can ask for, but I think he's more talented than 8,600 in and of himself. Getting 100 plus pitches per start. If he just has one of those games where he's dealing, getting into a 25 to 30% K rate, like maybe we don't have to have much of him, 6 to 8% to feel like, we're over the field, and at least he's a good pitcher, and we're not, punting and praying.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a very good call by you. And I think it's a spot where I would definitely look to get beyond the field, particularly at that price on DK and that ownership on DK. He's pulling a little bit more ownership because he's only 7,000 on the FanDuel slate, which is, it's just a misprice. I don't care who's on the other side. He's a more talented pitcher than that. And he's pulling less than 5% ownership over there. So I really like getting above the field, and it's easy enough to do. 26.3% strikeout rate over the course of the season, a 4x FIP. This is over 109 in the third innings and 21 starts. He was injured to start the year. 7.3% barrel rate, 42% hard hit. There's certainly things to quibble with in the 9.5% walk rate, the 132 whip, and that contact profile. But he's a better pitcher than the price and a better pitcher than the ownership. I wrote up the Dodgers this afternoon as a go-to stack and as my featured stack in my article because I also think they're not getting enough ownership on the other side of this one. But I think both sides of this, you can play both sides. You can really play 3 out of the 4 sides of this game because I want to have Clayton Kershaw on some lineups. I want to have some Zach Gallen over the field, and I want to be over the field to the Dodgers stack. It's just the Diamondbacks offense that I don't really care about. And honestly, based on the pricing on this slate, you can make an argument for it if you needed those cheap prices. So I think it's an interesting game and potentially a pivot point for where the entire slate's going to go. And yeah, I want to get over the field to that Gallen quality despite the essentially all-star team on the other side.
Yeah.
So I forgot that I had to ask you another question.
That's how this goes, right?
So any other value guys on the board? Like, is there any universe where you're going to like a Vince Velasquez just based on strikeout acumen, or are you seeing that one kind of the way I am as a potential powder keg for the Braves offense?
No, I think so. This morning I got the I don't know, the feeling that Velasquez is an opener kind of because he pitched 3 days ago. Like, I know he didn't last long. So
I was wondering about that. Yeah, I didn't have time to look into that, but I was like, I feel like he just pitched the other day.
Yeah, all so right. I wouldn't expect many. I would never want to play him anyway, even if he like 5-6 innings. But yeah, it looked like that game was trending more towards a bullpen type game than anything. But yeah, no Velasquez. Not even if there's a fire.
Yeah, he's been a guy that, I said it on a show the other day, probably 3 days ago when he made that start, is just, it's time that I've given up on expecting this guy to turn into anything. He's always been tantalizing with some of the talent, but always walked way too many guys, never quite got over the hump on the mid-range strikeouts. 12% walk rate this year, a 5.03 xFIP, nothing there for me to see if he's making the full start. If he's a bullpen game, like you said, I kind of want to be on the other side of that one on the Braves. That brings us up basically to the midpoint here. So unless you got another value play that you want to call out on the mound, we can knock out a little conversation about PrizePicks, talk about some picks for PrizePicks, and then maybe move on to the top stacks. Any other pitcher worth talking about here?
Nah, it's a pretty simple approach for me. I think we touched all the talking points.
Yeah, I'm seeing it the same way there. So let's talk a little PrizePicks real quick. They're our partner. If you've watched any of our other shows, they've been nice enough to sponsor all our shows throughout today, pretty sure. And I know I did one earlier for NASCAR and did one of these reads, and it's a really cool site if you guys haven't checked it out. It's a prop-based contest, so you don't worry about a lot of the standard DFS things like ownership and leverage. You're just going with your gut. You're just going with our projections, of course, and you're just making a few picks on those props. And what you have to do is you pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players on the board. They go over, they go under their projected scores. You make your picks. If you correctly pick a 5-player lineup, you can net up to 10x your entry fee. PrizePicks offers games for NBA, MLB, WNBA, NFL, esports, NASCAR, which I talked about earlier today. With the different sports, you can take advantage of their mixed sport entry feature. So you can grab something from over here, something from over there, put it together however you want to do it, and look for those 5 correct picks. You can jump on, you can download their app on the App Store or on Google Play today. You make your first deposit using promo code Awesemo. Everybody should know how to spell that from getting to the site. It's promo code Awesemo. You get an instant deposit match of up to $100. That is pretty solid money. Promo code Awesemo, $100 deposit match over there. So check them out, guys. App Store, Google Play, download PrizePicks. Check it out for tonight. I pulled out a few of the more interesting ones. So one of the ones that's kind of standing out at the top of the board, Corbin Burns over under 8.5 strikeouts. You looking to go under if you're making a PrizePicks pick here, Gun? Or are you looking to go over on that one?
That's like no man's land for me. I tend to stay away from 8, 9 plus. I look for the 4, 5, 6ers. But yeah, I mean, like he has. If I give him 100 pitches in my pitching model, I guess. Let's see, Burns. 100 pitches in my pitching model gives me 9.7 strikeouts. So I guess over if he made it to that.
Okay. All right. I've got him projected out at 6 innings in my model. That gives him an implied strikeout percentage of 8.39, which is like right there, but a little under. And then my actual projected, once we account for some other things in my model here, comes to 7.62. So I'm going to take the other side of that one. I'm going to go a little under. And I'm also going to maybe benefit from the fact that they might manage him a little bit here. So I'm going to take the under on that one. Another one that I thought was interesting, and it's another value guy that you brought up, Tyler Anderson, over under 16.5 outs for the game. These are talking about actual baseball stats, and we'll get to a fantasy points one next. Tyler Anderson, over under 16.5 outs. So we're talking about the depth of that game.
All right. So I have an out projector as well. Tyler Anderson's been getting to 90 pitches. 90 pitches last couple games. So if I got to 90 pitches, it gives me 20 outs in this lineup. So I probably take the over.
There we go. That sounds like a smash over to me. All right. So we're finding a good one there. And then the last one I called out, I was looking at the fantasy points board. I jumped over to the hitters. They offer hitters and pitchers separately. You can go by, with pitchers, you can go by some of the categories for baseball performance, or you can do by fantasy points. With hitters, you pull up the fantasy points. So kind of like you, I'm looking for ones that stand out from maybe, hey, that line just looks too low. Like what you said about Corbin Burns with those strikeouts. That's a high line. That's tough to get to regardless. But I'm looking for something that looked too low to me. And one that really jumped out was on the other side of that Burns start. The leadoff hitter for the Mets, Brandon Nimmo, over under 4.5 fantasy points in a universe where a single and a run scored equals 5 fantasy points. He's leading off. I know he's going up against a major quality starter, a majorly good bullpen, but that's not a ton to ask from a guy who I think is a pretty good hitter. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's chipping a chair territory. So very, very low. Yeah, I think the 4 or 5 implied at bats maybe there in that leadoff spot. Definitely not unthinkable for him to sneak a double or even sneak a single, like you said, a run, stolen base, something like that. So yeah. I guess it probably hits over more often than it doesn't, even despite one of the best pitchers on the planet being on the bump.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask going up against that pitcher, but I mean, you're talking about a guy who has got a 14.7% walk rate on the season. So a walk also gets you there with that. He's slashing 299, 410, 430. So he's on base all the time. Guy's a good hitter. So I thought that line was a little bit low over on PrizePicks, but check them out, guys. It's a really fun site, and make sure you take advantage of promo code Awesemo for that $100 deposit match. Moving on, let's take a look at some stacks, Gun. What is there's the obvious one at the top. We can start there. It's Coors Field, San Francisco, one of the best offenses in baseball. What really stands out if you look at San Francisco on the top stacks tool today? What jumps out at you?
Alex Dickerson jumps out at me, man. 2K is awfully cheap. But I tell you, this morning when I was looking at the slate with EMAC, I said earlier that no matter your style of play, like this slate gives you a lane. If you like to fade the chalk, like you can make a case that John Gray isn't a gas can. He's been stable at home. You can make a case that Zach Gallen's pretty decent. So like if you took, the Giants and the Dodgers off the top of your list and focused on, maybe Great American Ballpark, Camden Yards, something like that, like there's a world where that's viable. But just matchup wise, yeah, the Giants ended up being one of my my highest owned stack, just because it was kind of easy to do so with some of the value that's coming on the slate. And I think, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to see mispriced guys getting opportunities in the leadoff spot. I don't think Alex Dickerson should have ever been 2K, but a guy like Ryan McKenna getting a spot leadoff, opportunity in these late days of September, you're going to see that throughout these lineups. So it's going to be easier and easier to get to these stud stacks with decent to stud pitching. So I do have the Giants at the top of my list, but I'm contending with field ownership on that. And then the Dodgers. I thought about pushing back on the Dodgers with Gallen, but the Dodgers aren't picking up any ownership. So in baseball, oftentimes I like to be on the other side of ownership. If we have the Dodgers projected to have a 10.6% chance to be in the top stack on the entire slate, which is 4% ownership, like that's incredible leverage, especially when you're popping the lid open on Chase Field, 90-degree temperatures. And even if Gallen, held his own for 5, muscle through 5, that bullpen's been enough to that bullpen's been bad enough to pay off stacks even deep in games. So the Dodgers, I think, are just underrepresented in field ownership, that there's no reason not to get there on them. So I have them quite a bit. And then as I got a little bit trickier and creative, I ended up with like Twins and Camden and Great American Ballpark. But the top two are the top two for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what kind of really leaps off the board to me when I pull up the top stacks across both sites. You're getting both San Francisco and the Dodgers, and you can throw the Blue Jays into the mix, at least on DK. They came back to earth a little bit on the FanDuel slate. They're at worst efficiently on there, as are the White Sox in 4th place on both sites. White Sox trickling into negative leverage territory, so you can make up for it by dropping down to like Cincinnati or something if you want the 4th team on the DK slate. But having those top 3 teams at positive leverage and the top 2 teams at significantly positive leverage, that's just not something we ever see. Usually if the top team is overowned, the next couple will be underowned as the top options, or it'll be the other way around. The top option is underowned because they're expensive, because they're a course team, but everybody's going a different direction, something like that. And you see the next few options getting that negative leverage. Having those top 2 teams, yeah, that's just drawing the eye immediately. Those are the 2 teams I want to put together in a bunch of different combinations. And it makes a ton of sense. Like you said, there are values strung through that Giants offense. You get the Dodgers offense, which is essentially an all-star team. Is there a hole in this in the Dodgers offense as you go down 1 through 8 in this lineup? Is there anybody that you wouldn't want to play in a stack if you were building a bunch of Dodger stacks?
No. I guess Taylor has a high K rate. You'd be worried about that, but he's really positive on the bases. So no, there's nobody in this Dodge. This is an all-star lineup, so I'd get to them equally as liberal. Lux is at 3K, and that feels like an extremely valuable discount spot. And maybe you're worried about Dave Roberts, swapping some guys in, but like I said, Dodgers got to win. They're fighting for that division.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the important point to make here is they're only a game out of that division against the Giants there, and they need every win that they can get here. So definitely something they're going to be chasing. And as you look down that lineup, I mean, the average WRC plus for the top 7 hitters in the lineup today is 131, 31% better than the average creating runs. That's absurd. This team doesn't strike out much. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hitters out of the 8 that are under a 20% strikeout rate. They walk a ton. They hit for power. There's everything to love. These Dodgers are under-owned on this slate. Who else are you looking at in terms of after we get out of the top range there? Maybe those couple were obvious. Are you getting to any Blue Jays stacks in that 3rd spot? Or are you starting to look further down the board and maybe find a little bit more leverage there for you with somewhat similar upside? It's not the steepest hill down from like the 3rd spot to, let's say, the 6th or 7th spot at least.
Yeah, but Blue Jays kind of slide in there. They kind of have the same price points as the Dodgers and the Giants. So you're not getting a huge discount, but John Gant's been a ground ball guy, especially to righties, which is the bulk of the Blue Jays lineup. A 54% ground ball rate right now to righties. So even, if they're getting on, it doesn't look like it's going to be by way of the long ball, but then you tap into the Twins bullpen and bad things happen to good people. So I'm in on the Blue Jays as well, but I have more of the top 2. But this was a great slate to get creative. The Cincinnati Reds are one of my favorite home teams to stack. I don't mind getting there. I think the Nationals has some viability just because of that ballpark. We saw it yesterday. Even, a guy like Sonny Gray, who's one of the better pitchers the Reds can offer up, and Nats were able to put up what was it, like an 8-7 ball game yesterday. This ballpark puts up runs. It's one of the best ballparks in baseball for homers. So I like that game stack as a whole, and you don't have to give up much equity in your MME to have exposure to it and even be overexposed versus the field. And then Camden Yards, no one woke up today to acknowledge the Rangers or Orioles existence, but these are 2 two pitchers that would probably be average minus at best. And these are, bullpens that can get got. So sloppy baseball can happen here. The Orioles lineup, like I said, looks even worse than the usual lineup. So it's a little harder to be warm and fuzzy, but you saw weird names rise to the top yesterday. I think Adalis Garcia, Nate Lowe, Willie Calhoun leading off. We have a couple 2K leadoff guys in this game. Yeah. McKenna and Calhoun. I mean, that's enough implied value to really glue in those aces and high stacks. And I feel like, maybe that's where the field just starts ending up by default. If you have Calhoun, Alex Dickerson, and McKenna in your pool, there's not much you can't do. And that includes getting to Corbin Burns and Robbie Ray. So this would just be like betting on the variance of baseball. And if the Orioles pitching staff gave up 5 homers, is anybody really surprised?
Right. And then if you look at the backward wraparound with the Orioles, you could actually stack 5 DraftKings hitters at the minimum price, every single one of them who hit sequentially, if you wanted to get wacky with it. Those are not good hitters. We're talking about Pat Valeke, Jamal Jones, Kevin Gutierrez, Nick Ciuffo, and then Ryan McKenna up at the top of the lineup. Nobody's going to be doing that. You would probably have, a lot of money left over, even stacking the best pitchers in the best next stack, but you could do it. So there's a ton of value available. You can do literally anything that you want in terms of putting lineups together. I think this game is worth talking about, though, because to me, it looks like the Rangers, despite it's an extreme quality matchup. You're talking about Chris Ellis on the hill for the Orioles, over 26 and a third major league innings, an 18.9% strikeout rate, and 11.7% walk rate, 13.3% barrels, 50.7% hard hit percentage. That is massive. There is major offensive upside for the Rangers here, but they're drawing a fair amount of ownership, and it's more ownership than I really like to give these bad teams, particularly on the FanDuel slate, where they're just basically cheap top to bottom. They're drawing into the 20s, the high teens on a lot of these hitters. And to me, there's actually more talent in the at least 2, 3, 4, and 5 hitters on the other side in the middle of that Orioles lineup who are a little bit more expensive, but drawing less ownership overall. Does that make sense to you to maybe just, if you're talking about this game, just pivot away from the overowned Rangers into the Orioles if you're looking for value?
Yeah, Mountcastle, Hayes, Santander, Mancini, all replacement plus level players. I think Mountcastle's a lot better than people give him credit for. Austin Hayes has been on fire the last month and a half or so, and then Mancini could be a starter on many ball clubs. So I agree with that take. I think those are the guys. I would love to see Cedric Mullins, or would have loved to see Cedric Mullins at the top of this lineup, and that I would have been really, really interested in a 5-man Orioles. But yeah, I think those 4 versus the Rangers' best 4. I think the Orioles went out in the talent department.
Yeah, I think so too. So that's just kind of what naturally leads me there, and it's not that different of a spend up. So yeah, I'm looking at that. I want to swing back over to that Cincinnati game though too, because it's interesting. It is a compelling spot given, the Nationals, their lack of quality, but the lack of quality with Vladimir Gutierrez on the mound, 17.7% strikeout rate for him, giving up a decent amount of hard contact at 37.5%. There's a lot to like about attacking him, but you get the Nats, you get Juan Soto soaking up so much of that ownership. He cost $6,200 on that DK slate. Even with all the value, that does become a little bit prohibitive in terms of being able to put together the Robbie Ray, Corbin Burns kind of a lineup, plus getting to Soto, and then maybe spreading out to, like, if you wanted to go to Coors Field and the Nats, it becomes a little difficult. And then you get Josh Bell in there at 51, Alcides Escobar even at 4,800. So it's not like they're overly discounted. They're getting a little popularity around the hitters that I want to get to. Is it just that good of a matchup for going up against Gutierrez that you just want to attack it? And the ballpark factor as well, that you're willing to swallow some of that ownership? Are you looking to build with some of the alternative hitters in that lineup? How are you stacking the Nats if you're doing it?
I wouldn't stack the Nats and not get to some Juan Soto. The values very, very prevalent on the slate. I guess in my mind, I still am thinking of the top 2 teams, the Dodgers and Giants, being super owned, but they're really not. Like, I guess the Giants, I just did a refresh. They're pushing 20% now. So maybe we lost some of that leverage that we thought we would have had. But Colorado's still up there, and then Texas. So if we're looking at San Francisco outside of Juan Soto, or Washington outside of Juan Soto, I still think guys like Lane Thomas, Josh Bell offer some upside here. The rest of this lineup gets a little bit rough. Escobar can hit for a decent average, and maybe you get lucky with some of these other guys. Like I said, this ballpark can reward some sloppy hitters into good days because of how hitter friendly it is. But if I had to pick four, it'd probably be Lane Thomas, Soto, Bell, and then I'd coin flip Escobar and Garcia, with Escobar being the more likely on base guy to be involved in some of those Soto RBIs.
Yeah, and that's where it gets dicey is once you start looking for that fourth man and there's it's all right. Maybe it gets a little thin. So maybe we're grabbing 3 on DK from that lineup. On the other side, definitely not the best version that we've ever seen of this Cincinnati lineup, but definitely a lot of value in there. Some very capable hitters, some guys who can surprise from slate to slate with their quality. Looking a little underowned to me going up against Fede on this one, and I know that's a spot that you like, so I definitely think we agree on that one. Do you have a favorite hitter from that Reds lineup who's not named Nick Castellanos?
Castellanos has my highest. Eugenio Suarez has my highest bomb rating, but Castellanos is also up there. Fede's kind of weird, man. He gives up bombs, but he also has a high ground ball rate. So you kind of, playing with fire. But I think Castellanos, India, Max Schrock has shown a little bit of a pop lately. He's still cheap, 2,100 on FanDuel, 2,800 on DraftKings. Lucrative spot batting second. So I don't mind getting to him. Yeah, I guess it kind of falls out at the bottom of the lineup as well. But that's kind of like the story of these teams in September.
Yeah, and we're seeing that with a lot of them. You get 2 catchers in the lineup on DK, so they're interesting to just kind of mix and match in different combinations around Stevenson and Barnhart. So there's different things you can do with them on the DK slate that also help them be interesting. Multi-position eligibility for 3 guys on the FanDuel slate. I get the same thing, by the way. I've got him super close. Nick Castellanos, 10.70 in my home run model. Eugenio Suarez, 10.71. So that's about as close as you can possibly get. Both guys pulling some ownership, but I think both worth rostering in this spot. Before we move on, guys, we've got 2 new channels on YouTube that you guys got to check out. The links are down there somewhere. So as you scroll down, when you hit the thumbs up, when you subscribe to this channel, if you hadn't, make sure that you pop those links open. Jump over to them while you're listening to this show. We'll keep on talking. You guys can go to the other tab and then come back and watch the rest of the show. But jump in there and subscribe to the channel so that you get all the notifications. That's our fantasy football channel and it's our sports betting channel. 2 pretty important things to have on tap during football season with all this action going on. We've got videos going up there all the time. We're constantly making shows for season-long fantasy football, for sports betting, up and down. So make sure you're subscribing to those new channels, guys. Get over there, give us a like, give us a subscribe on everything that you watch. Gun, what are we looking at as some contrarian possibilities? Well, actually, before we do that, one that I think we do need to swing back to is the Colorado Rockies. They're getting some attention in the Coors Field game on the other side of Disclafani. Are you looking at Rockies at all before we get into more contrarian options?
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So I noticed we just pushed down an update in the top stack tool. I don't know if you've had a chance to refresh it and absorb some of this information. But the Giant stack. So we were talking about the Giants as a top 2 team that offered some leverage. We don't really have that leverage anymore because the ownership's pushed 20. So we still have. Yeah, it's a huge swing, and I think a 2K Alex Dickerson might have had something to do with that. I can't get away from that. Like, how did that happen? So looking at our new most up to date projections, Cincy and Washington, the game we're talking about outside of the Dodgers, has amongst the highest leverage scores here. So that makes me kind of more keen on that than I was maybe 10 minutes ago. But anyway, where are we going about the Rockies, right?
The Rockies, yeah.
So their ownership kind of dipped down a little bit, right? Earlier we had them pushing 17. Now we're down to 12. It's a little bit more manageable to where I don't have to give up too much equity. I'm not at 12 as it is, but it's not as egregious. So I'm lower than the field at 12%. I have right now in my Rockies, I have 8%. So I'm a little bit lower.
Okay. And look, I mean, we're talking about a bad baseball team playing at Coors Field, which is the major differentiator there. And they're drawing ownership because they've got a ton of value. Nobody in that lineup priced over 5,000 on DK. Nobody priced over 4,500 on DK. This is still a Coors Field game going up against Anthony DeSclafani. It's not like Eric Cole's on the mound on the other side of this one. So there's reason to get there. They provide value. And I tell you what, the ownership is really concentrated around three guys. And that's Ryan Tapia, Brendan Rodgers, and CJ Cron. CJ Cron I get, Brendan Rodgers I get. Ryan Tapia a little bit less, but he is at least the leadoff hitter. Yeah. 328 on base percentage, a 76 WRC plus for your leadoff hitter. I would argue with whether or not he should be in that role, but he is. But you can get to some low ownership around some guys that I think are good players. Charlie Blackmon, Ryan McMahon, Elias Diaz for – Elias Diaz slashing 236, 304, 463, not really blowing anybody's doors off, 10% worse than league average WRC plus, but a 227 ISO and 18 home runs and 355 plate appearances for a catcher. That's worth more than $3,900 on DK to me, 10% ownership. Sam Hilliard, a lot of power at the back end of that lineup. So there's some interesting hitters in there who are maybe not getting all the attention of the more obvious names. So I think, going to the less obvious guys at Coors Field always makes some sense to me. Looking around the board, we talked about the Rangers drawing like ridiculous ownership. I'm looking for some leverage here. I'm looking for some leverage that's not coming from Cincinnati. I'm seeing the Mariners standing out a little bit, like kind of in the middle of the board. They don't run off and hide from anybody on the top end, but they're not one of our bottom ranked teams either. What are you seeing for the Mariners at positive leverage here?
Let's see. So they're still knocking on the door of 5 implied run totals. Berea, somebody who can give up good average and a little bit of power to lefties. So them leading off with a guy like Crawford. Seager's been swinging a good stick, and Jared Kelenic batting fifth. Not a bad spot for him. So I think just in theory, maybe the price is normally like just implied value versus the field. Like you don't find yourself here a lot, but you just baseball gets weird sometimes, right? If you get a meager return scoring wise from Coors, from Chase, whatever, and the Mariners served you up, 3 bombs, a couple stolen bases, they can definitely bring it because the Angels bullpen is something that I don't necessarily run from either. And Berea is he's going to let you put the ball in play. And sometimes all it takes is putting the ball in play, especially for a Mariners lineup that has a lot of 1 and 4 strikeouts in it. And Berea has an overall 14% K rate, just a 7.6% swing and strike rate. So maybe a guy like Crawford, a little bit of speed to him, still a couple of infield singles. Like I said, you manufacture some goodness, while the Mariners are not likely to make the playoffs. They're not mathematically out of it yet, so they still have a little bit to play for.
Yeah, it's tough when a team like that's got to beat out the entire AL East. But I agree. They're a more interesting team than I think they've gotten credit for a lot of the season. I've written them up a few times in recent weeks, and I like that 1 through 6 with Crawford, France, Seager, Haniger, Kelenic batting fifth, like you said, and then Abraham Toro. I can even throw Luis Torrens and all his power as a catcher into that mix there. 43.4% hard hit rate, 11.4% barrel rate for Torrens, 15 home runs over 349 plate appearances with a 196 ISO. Certainly something to like for a catcher who's not drawing any ownership, is not overly expensive. I love the power that you get around Kyle Seager and Mitch Haniger in the middle of the lineup. Kelenic up to 13 home runs at this point. Toro with 10 home runs, 5 stolen bases is at least interesting with a little bit of ability to get on base. So I think they're an interesting team to throw up against the guy with a 14.4% strikeout rate over 54 and 2/3 innings, a 5.08 xFIP, allowing 41.2% hard hit on the season. We could see some sneaky upside from that Mariners squad. So I like that one. That's one I'm going to be looking toward. I mentioned earlier in the show when it was just a Vince Velasquez play that I was getting to some Braves, and I still think that's justifiable based on their ownership, even if it pulls down maybe their overall projections, maybe the overall home run marks that I have for them in my home run model, because it's maybe not going to be it's definitely not going to be a full start by Velasquez. But going up against the Padres bullpen, are you seeing any value in getting to some of these Braves bats? Because they're a team that's been not overperforming. They've just been excellent as we expected all season. And they're another team for me that plays 1 through 8. I like all of these hitters.
Yeah, again, we're just betting on the stack to deliver. It's not like we're getting any implied value or discount versus Dodgers and Giants. Matter of fact, cumulatively they might be more expensive than the Giants in Coors Field. So more reason to maybe look their way against Velasquez. I love their chances of getting through to Velasquez. It's just a matter of how long Velasquez might be out there. If you get 1 or 2 rounds of at bats for the Braves, I'm definitely a buyer. In my home run model, the Braves are at the top, but I do have to put a little bit of a humanistic expectation because of what we think Velasquez might be limited to. So I'm in on the Braves. I just think they're a really talented team. And, when we start isolating who's playing for what, the Braves are trying to keep separate from some of the Phillies. So, there's no reason to ever take your foot off your gas or take your foot off the opponent's neck here. Keep scoring. And I'm not worried about them double switching too many of their talented guys out as we get through to this game. So I'm in on the Braves, but just implied value. You're not getting a discount on their price points for Petco Field when you got Dodgers and Chase and Giants and Coors.
Makes sense. I'm just taking a look through the chat for any questions. Our pal Jordan Klein asked the question to Sean V what the V stands for. It obviously is the Roman numeral 5. It's Sean 5. So Sean 5 is saying that the Mariners are not a good stack today, and that Jaime Barria delivered against the Astros the last time out. So that obviously takes the Mariners off the table. What do you think of that take?
He'll also let you know that Jordan Lyles once held the Red Sox at bay, so he's not always bad, and we should not stack against him ever. And anytime it worked, like tonight, Jordan Lyles might actually be a good place. I'm sure I'll hear about it within the next couple of days.
Of course. So just looking through here, somebody in here did ask, who are our favorite cheap plays, specifically cheap pitchers? They missed most of the show and they're looking to just jam some Coors bats in. So if you're looking to jam some Coors bats, who's your most viable, less expensive pitching play on FanDuel?
I would say don't sacrifice pitching for Coors. You can get Coors by getting to Alex Dickerson, who's in Coors, Ryan McKenna, 2K leadoff, Willie Calhoun, 2K leadoff. I'd rather have Burns and Ray, the floor and ceiling ratio, and still have my 5-man Coors, 4-man Coors. It wasn't that hard to do. So maybe absorb the pricing elsewhere and the opportunity at value, because I'd rather have, Burns, Ray with Coors versus Eli Morgan and Jordan Lyles in Coors. I don't think you're giving up too much to still have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, absolutely. The guy that I will throw that out there, if that person's bound to determine, hey, I have to play Coors here, man. If you're playing on the FanDuel slate, the one guy that stands out as the value pitcher to me from any pricing tier on that is Huascar Ynoa at 7,600 and not that much ownership. So that would be my guy in that spot. But I agree with you. I would just be more inclined to jump up to one of the better starters and not necessarily force Coors or not necessarily force too much of Coors. So I don't see any other real big questions. We got about are we running to 7? I don't know if we're running to 7 or 705. Let's keep talking. Let's pretend like we're running to 705. What's is there a value stack that we didn't talk about on the board here for you?
Value stack. I guess the Orioles by proxy because of so many 2K guys, but I obviously am not getting there. I think we've touched bases on all the real viable ones, and I didn't feel like I needed to get too crazy in the construction process because of the scattered value guys that we do have.
Makes sense. So we both got our home run model.
You know what? I don't want to cut you off. I will say that I do have some twin stacks. Right? Maybe it's the Yankee fan in me hoping the Blue Jays get bopped, but Robbie Ray at that ownership with the Twins having, their power ratings and their ability to get to, Buxton leadoff, Polanco, Donaldson, Garver. I like that 1 through 4 quite a bit. So Twins, I feel like could be a pretty elite leverage stack versus his 30-40% ownership on Robbie Ray. And if they got through, no one's really landing on Minnesota at a bullish rate. We got them at 2% owned. So maybe that's just me playing with fire and being a biased Yankee guy, but Robbie Ray does allow some homers to especially the righties, and the Twins have several power righties in that lineup.
Absolutely they do, and we talked about that with Ray a little bit on the front end. 42.8% hard hit percentage when guys are able to make contact, 8.9% barrel rate, 16.7 degree average launch angle. That bears repeating because when you look into that Twins lineup, I'm seeing 4 hitters with hard hit percentages well over 50%. Byron Buxton, 51.7. Josh Donaldson, 52.4. Mitch Garver, 52.8. Miguel Sano, 54.8. All of those guys, significant barrel rates, 15.9, 16.9, 16.8, 17.8. The top 6 hitters in that lineup are all over a 10% barrel rate. The average between those hitters is a 14.9% barrel rate. The average hard hit percentage between those 6 hitters is 49.3%. Those are significant numbers for a team not drawing that much ownership. Mitch Garver, cleanup, $4,000 catcher on DK, under 5% ownership. That's super interesting to me. I think it makes a hell of a lot of sense to stack these Twins up, and you're attacking a gigantic portion of the field that's got Robbie Ray in there. Odds are Robbie Ray is going to go out, strike out 10 of these guys, sit down with not having given up too many runs, and the Blue Jays are going to win this one. But you don't need the Twins to hit a few home runs off of him too many times, and it is on the table. And if we get the version of Robbie Ray that maybe walks 3 or 4 of these guys instead of 1 or 2 of these guys, that could be a blow-up spot. So I really like that call. I think that's a great way to round off the show, round off talking about stacks. We've both got home run models. You've got the bomb detector. I've got the home run model because I'm not as creative. But we both have some home run picks. It can help us talk about some of these individual hitters as well. You go first. What are you seeing in the bomb detector that might lead you to some individual hitter plays that we didn't really talk about? Or is it maybe indicating a stronger stack that is on the board for you? And then who's your overall home run pick?
Yeah, so actually there's a lot of Twins in my home run model. But I think matchup wise, I'm looking at, like, if I had to, attach my name to a call, maybe it'd be like Luis Robert. I think, we can bank on a few at-bats and the positive matchup and positive batted ball matchup. Same with Yasmani Grandal. So I'd be cool with signing off on those 2. But outside of those 2, Terry, like the top 4 guys in my bomb detector are like the Braves against Velasquez, and we don't know how long Velasquez is going to go. And then it's the Twins. So the Twins, if they make contact, which is much easier said than done with their K rates and Robbie Ray's K rates, but they do have an opportunity to hit for some power here.
Absolutely. And just looking at so that everybody can see that, behind the curtain, that we're so similar on the same page. The entire top of my board is Twins with some Braves mixed in, and then I'm getting another team in the mix there, and it was the team that you went to right off the top, the White Sox, getting monster power ratings on some of these White Sox. So I actually went with Freddie Freeman as my home run pick for the day in my tournament strategy article that's free on the site that everybody can check out. But I mean, I'm getting explosive numbers around Eloy Jimenez, Jose Abreu, the obvious guys, Yasmani Grandal, who doesn't get enough respect for the excellent, amazing hitter that he is, Luis Robert, Yoan Moncada up at the top there. Those guys are all at the top of my board before it gets to the Twins. So I'm actually seeing a little bit more pop for the White Sox side. But if you're home run hunting, put the White Sox and the Twins together, mix in some Braves, and you're probably going to be coming away with at least a couple knocks. I think Andrew Vaughn for super cheap from the bottom of that White Sox lineup is pretty interesting for a little bit of underappreciated pop there. So yeah, get to those guys. We're very much on the same page. That's where I think the power lives today. So I think that covers us from top to bottom. Let me see. We got a couple of minutes left. If anybody's asked any interesting questions, I'm sure we'll answer them. Let's see. Doesn't look like it's got some Sean V takes in there. We've got some Sean 5. Yeah, Sean 5 loves the bomb detector. What happens when that's not a question that we can answer here. A fight broke out. Somebody's drinking peach Jim Beam. Oh, that's Jordan. Jordan's drinking peach Jim Beam behind the scenes. Right on. Yeah, I think we covered this one top to bottom, inside out. Any final thought that you want to give the people?
No, I think this should be a fun. I'm just loving these important baseball games. We're getting like a taste of the playoffs. I got Fenway on the side. It's a 1-run game in the 8th, and every pitch has just got thousands of people it mesmerized. I love it. Yeah,
miss that feeling for sure. And that's a good point. I should have ended this 5 minutes ago so I could go watch the end of that game. But guys, we appreciate everybody hanging out with us. Jump on there, hit the like. Hit the subscribe. Make sure that you're getting the notifications from us every time we go live. Speaking of going live, we have wall-to-wall coverage tomorrow, starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. Is that an 8 or is that a 9? Looks like a 9. Might be 9, might be 8. I don't know. Tune in early. Yeah, it's an 8. It's the Awesemo Betting Show. Comes up with Pete and Ben starting at 8 o'clock, taking you through all the different odds. That's over on the odds channel. Then starting at 9, we have our DFS coverage, starting with the NFL First Look with Josh and Adam, into the deeper dive with Lofty, Ben, and Matt Savoca, into Live Before Lock, which looks like it's going to be Josh, Eric, and to be decided. Maybe one of us can jump into that spot. Who knows? Then at 11:45, we've got the the Fantasy Football Show with Eitan and Nick over on the Fantasy Football channel. That goes at the same time as the DFS stuff is going. If you're into the Showdown slate in the evening, I'll be back to talk to everybody along with Emac and Nick. We'll be talking through the Showdown slate in the evening. There's just a ton of football coverage. Where else are you going to go? Tune in tomorrow. We'll see you there. Thanks a lot, everybody.